Today in Missouri, 2 more people were confirmed dead after their vehicles were swept away by floodwaters. At least 5 people have died there since the weekend, and Michelle Miller is following this.
4 days of rain have soaked towns along the Merrimack River. Near Eureka, the water is 26 feet above flood stage. After flood barriers were breached overnight, downtown looked like this.
I'm just tossing. Yeah.
Now an army of sandbaggers made up of volunteers and National Guardsmen are racing to save the city of 10,000, where nearly 100 homes and businesses are threatened by a river that's less than 24 hours from cresting.
Can we drop some sandbags or something down there on the back end?
Scott Barthelmess is with the Eureka Fire Department.
The new crest is 46.4 on the river at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.
So you're breaking the record?
We are, the all-time record, correct.
At 8 feet high, it's intersection posts like this at South Central Avenue and Old Town Drive that are the perfect guide for traffic. Today, boat traffic.
Across Missouri, stretches of highway that have turned into waterways are closed. Torrential rain has caused flooding in 7 states. At least 13 areas along rivers in Missouri and Oklahoma have reached record crests. In Fenton, Missouri, Barbara Niels hopes the fortress of sandbags around her property will keep the water away.
I pray it doesn't touch the house. I just pray.
The river is expected to crest early Wednesday morning, but towns like Eureka and others, well, they're in for a rough few days, Scott. 4 more inches of rain are in the forecast.
Michelle Miller, thanks very much.
By the floodwater, right up on Highway 79. Lots of debris here. As we see 2 vehicles try to make it there. Look, we are now at Eureka High School. This is Eureka High School. We're recording this for video use later. This would be east of Pacific.
Millions are under a state of emergency in the central U.S. after a deadly storm triggered massive flooding. Severe thunderstorms also pounded parts of western Pennsylvania and New York State. Downpours flooded streets and high winds toppled trees. The storm system began this weekend and exploded over the plains with torrential rain, tornadoes, and even snow in the month of May. At least 16 people were killed there. Dozens more were hurt. This morning, flood warnings cover most of the state of Missouri. Michelle Miller's in Pacific. That's outside St. Louis, where overnight floodwaters from the Merrimack River closed part of a major interstate. Michelle, good morning to you.
Good morning. The Merrimack River is just a half mile behind me, but to give you an idea of just how fast these waters have risen, right about here as of 2 hours ago was dry land. Now, people all along this river have been evacuated, and these rising waters continue to threaten homes and businesses.
3 days of heavy downpours have inundated rivers across Missouri, forcing floodwaters to spill into cities, across highways, and through backyards. Volunteers, including Governor Eric Greitens, have been scrambling to prepare for the rising water.
When we were warned that this weather was coming, we proactively went out, declared a state of emergency, which allowed us to position swift water rescue teams around the state. Those teams have conducted hundreds of operations, literally saved hundreds of lives.
State officials have shut down dozens of roads and bridges threatened by the flooding. Currents were so powerful along the Merrimack River near St. Louis, this entire steel bridge was swept away. Images taken before and after the flooding throughout the state show the devastating impact.
It happened so fast. Once the water started coming in under the doors, I don't know if it was 15, 20 minutes, and it was thigh high in the house.
In Arkansas, a 2-day search for 2 young children switched from a rescue to a recovery effort. The pair were swept away from their mother in floodwaters on Saturday, bringing their grandfather to tears.
Tore my heart out.
The Merrimack River is expected to crest near record levels tomorrow morning, and more rain is due Wednesday, which could increase the possibility of flash flooding. Charlie?
Michelle, thank you so much.
The pictures of the day, not the pictures of the week necessarily, but the pictures of the day, before and afters of the flooding. First, we have to talk about how much rain fell, though.
A lot, a ton. And so we took you back more than 7 days now, because this is the 3rd round of rain that we're dealing with. And over the last 2 weeks, look at this big bullseye here, Steph. 15 plus inches of rain.
6 states saw 10 to 15 inches of rain. So what does that do to the ground? Well, look at this. Is from NASA. This is from outer space. This is from April 25th. And notice all the greenery. I want you to focus in these black areas. This is the Mississippi River. So those are bodies of water where you see the black on the map.
That's right. Now let's advance to what it looks like now, and you're going to see that area just expand. Look at all that. Down here, Pocahontas, where we had the levee breach, Poplar Bluff. Look at all that blue. That all just fills in. And unfortunately, as we're watching the Mississippi River, especially around here towards Cape Girardeau, that's going to look worse, I think, in the next couple days.
And the Missouri River then also feeding it, what's feeding into the Missouri and then feeding into the Mississippi as well. So that's not it, right? So it's not just this one area. This one is in Arnold, Missouri, Highway 21 at the Merrimack River.
Yeah, they just opened Interstate 55, by the way, but check out this on Highway 21. This is what it looks like normally. And let's go ahead and advance and show you. Look at that. So all that water spilling in right in between the overpass.
Right. This is actually a little deceiving to the eye, because when it looked to me at first there was concrete divider, and I remember going back to the picture, I'm like, wait, there's no concrete divider in between the two. But if you refocus your eyes, if you were having trouble like me, you might not have had trouble, but for those of you who were, when you watch the flooding, it's all the water pouring in between the two there. So that's water pouring down right there off of the ledge.
Yeah, so imagine how high it was if it wasn't pouring through.
Right.
The Black River jumped a levee today in northeast Arkansas, flooding the historic town of Pocahontas. Officials saw this disaster coming and ordered everyone out. But flash floods have killed at least 7 people in Arkansas last weekend. Michelle Miller is there.
The Black River spilled across Pocahontas, Arkansas after heavy rains breached a levee. About 50 homes have been destroyed and up to 100 homes and businesses damaged.
Where were the breaches?
They were east of here, probably.
Cecil Tackett is the city's police chief.
This morning at 6 o'clock, there was fish swimming across here.
Across this highway?
Yes.
Murky floodwaters turned this playground into a water park. Days of torrential rainfall caused a number of rivers near Pocahontas to swell as much as 9 inches. Add the nearly 8 inches that fell in Pocahontas last week, and it was more than the levee could take. The threat of a breach forced a mandatory evacuation of the city of 7,000 on Monday. Rising water sent folks like Jeff Junkersfeld to move his mom out of harm's way.
It's sad. A lot of people had to get their stuff out and get out of their element and find places to stay, find places to live.
Portions of major highways across the state are closed as sandbags are piled along flooded roads. William Brummett is a volunteer.
This is kind of a race here. What they're predicting is it to go up. It'll be really close, so they're not taking any chances.
The deluge is part of the most extreme flooding in the region in a century. Hundreds of roads are also closed in neighboring states, including Missouri.
The area around Pocahontas is about as flat as a pool table. So while the river may not be rising anymore, Scott, the water here could be around for 36 hours or longer.
And the governor of Arkansas has now called out the National Guard to help with rescues. Michelle Miller on the Flood Watch for us tonight. Michelle, thank you.
That record flooding in the Midwest, rivers have burst from heavy rains, damaging hundreds of homes, closing roads and highways. ABC's Alex Perez is on the scene in Missouri. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning, George. Here in this neighborhood, the river and the streets have essentially become one. It's been a nonstop operation to keep the water from getting inside homes.
Overnight, a flash flood emergency for Arkansas residents, with entire communities like Pocahontas swallowed by overflowing water.
Today, they have identified 9 levee breaches.
It is so going to hit the bridge.
The current is sending this cabin on the loose, slamming right into a bridge.
Oh God.
In Missouri, residents still on high alert.
You can see the debris that the river has swept on top of the bridge.
As the Merrimack River continues to swell, now 27 feet above flood stage, damaging at least 200 homes nearby, with many roads and highways across the state shut down. In Eureka, emergency crews and at least 2,000 volunteers worked around the clock, filling over 250,000 sandbags.
The results of all those volunteers working, the sandbags held, the pumps are still working, and there's no water in these businesses.
Especially we get stuck.
And in Louisiana, all students on this school bus safe after this scary situation, stuck in floodwaters at an intersection before the bus tipped to the side after severe storms dropped about 8 inches of rain in some areas.
And no relief here just yet. More rain expected today before they can finally begin assessing the damage here. George?
Yeah, those waters are high. Alex, thanks very much.
Matters series, the Trump administration is considering withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, or at least weakening the U.S. commitment to reducing about 1/4 of the U.S. carbon emissions by the year 2025. The Paris Climate Agreement is the world's first comprehensive climate agreement. It was adopted in 2015 by nearly 200 nations. Sources tell CNN that a decision by President Trump could come as early as next week. Here with me to talk about it more is Todd Stern. He was the lead U.S. negotiator for the Paris Agreement under former President Obama. Todd, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Jake.
What would it mean if the U.S. were to pull out entirely from the agreement?
It would be a huge big deal. I mean, it would fundamentally undermine the international regime. First of all, you can't solve climate change without an international regime because it's a quintessentially global problem. You can't just.
When you say international regime, you mean by the international community?
Yes. So Paris is an agreement that was entered into by 195 nations who all had to agree, who had been working on this for years and years and years, and it happened with enormous U.S. leadership. Right.
Yeah.
So you have great investment. But you can't get the problem solved without that kind of international cooperation, and if the U.S. is not part of it, you're not going to. The U.S. is essentially an indispensable nation. You got to have the U.S. in order for this agreement to really work, and it would also have an enormous impact on the U.S. itself.
And if the U.S. were to weaken the commitment, not pull out entirely, but just say we're not going to meet that standard, or we're not going to try to meet that standard by 2025, what would that mean?
I think that would be very unfortunate. It would be a bad signal. It would be a bad example to others. But it's a lot better than pulling out of the agreement altogether. So I don't condone that at all. But as between the two, it's absolutely better to stay in the agreement. And look, the pulling out would cause enormous damage to the standing of the United States in the world. You have enormous investment by countries all over the world. The U.S. pulling out would be a kind of slap in the face. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of to hell with you with respect to an issue that countries have been enormously concerned about, rightly concerned about. And if you then think you're going to turn around and seek cooperation of other countries on all sorts of other issues, It's not going to happen.
You think it will undermine the ability of President Trump to do diplomacy on North Korea, on Iran, on anything else?
I think on all sorts of issues, whether it's going to affect North Korea or Iran or this one or that one in particular. I think it depends. But you will see U.S. credibility and leverage in the international community absolutely reduced, because this is an issue that people care about and that they know they cannot solve without U.S. engagement. So for the U.S. to suddenly say, we really don't care about your concerns, and we're going to look the other way, and we're going to walk away from everything that we've just done, would be very, very damaging.
In terms of President Trump, what would you... he has said that he thinks climate change is a Chinese hoax. He obviously does not take it seriously at all. There are people in the administration, such as Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and others, who take it more seriously and don't want him to withdraw. How is the environmental community, how are people like you trying to convince him not to pull out of this or not to weaken it?
Well, look, you don't just need to look at the environmental community, right? I mean, you look at the Pentagon, you look at the intelligence community, you look at the business community. There's overwhelming support in the business community for the United States to stay in, and for good reason. They look at climate change. They actually know it's real. It's not an ideological issue for them. This is a dollars and cents issue. They know that Paris was a good deal, an historic deal, and that's balanced. They want the United States in this deal, because if they're not in this deal, the business interests of the U.S. won't be protected. There's all kinds of issues that arise in these discussions, and they will be ongoing discussions to further implement Paris. But issues like intellectual property, and issues like trade, the U.S. Business community won't be protected if the United States is not there, and they know it, and business likes predictability.
Much of the eastern part of the country is already in the midst of or is preparing to deal with flooding. Forecasters say parts of southern Ontario could receive a month's worth of rain over the next 3 days.
Steps to my deck, the whole front part here just floated away. I went fishing for my deck and the dock.
This is what it looked like Wednesday in Rockland, Ontario, on a rare sunny day. This is just east of Ottawa. People there have spent the last few days filling sandbags to protect their homes. Shorelines in the upper Ottawa Valley are also being swallowed up by erosion and landslides.
We came home and we had 3.5 feet of water in the basement.
And severe flooding has hit several communities in Quebec. People are leaving their homes located on the islands west of Montreal. Same story in New Brunswick. Fredericton is expecting up to 50 millimeters of rain in the coming days. People living near the St. John River are being told to be on alert. Dave Phillips, senior climatologist for Environment Canada, is joining me now from Toronto. Dave, good to see you. Boy, is it time to start building the ark? It seems like it has been raining for weeks, not just here in Ontario, but also Quebec.
Absolutely, Marcia. You know, we have seen April showers have become May showers, and certainly in the last 5 weeks in many parts of Ontario and Quebec, it's been the wettest such period on record. But you know, Marcia, if you go back even to January, from January, February, March, April, and now May, in many places, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, for example, it's been the rainiest such period on record, with records that go back for many decades. So we've seen a lot of rain, and it's not been necessarily gully washers, but just a lot of almost steady rains over several days. Storm systems seem to be taking their sweet time leaving Canada. It used to hit and run, and now raining on Thursday, it's still raining on Saturday. And this particular system that we may see 70 to 100 millimeters of rain in parts of Ontario. They just can't take it right now. The ground is so saturated. It's soaked. Water levels in rivers and creeks and the Great Lakes are way up. And so it's just too much rain over a long period of time is leading to flooding situations, and farmers haven't been able to get onto their fields.
Dave, what's creating all of these storm systems? What's making this water machine move along in full throttle?
Well, a good description of it, Marcia, and clearly these systems, there's been many of them, but they've been really uncharacteristically slow, just laboring along the landscape and more time to spread its misery. We're seeing a lot of active weather coming from the United States, And it's just the frequency of it, the intensity at some times, just the monotony of it, just day after day with rain. I think weather rage is breaking out there. We're just seeing too much of the same old weather. And in Ontario this weekend, it's going to feel very ugly because we're going to see a lot of cold air come down. We're going to see temperatures that are going to barely get up to 6 or 7 or 8 degrees, about a dozen degrees colder than normal. So in April, we had warm rains. Now in May, we're going to get cold rains, and we may even see some white stuff in the air in parts of the GTA and also in cottage country. So it's not going to be apple blossoms or cherry blossoms. It's going to be the snow, the ugly four-letter word. So, but it's really the rain that's going to cause a lot of problems. And around the Great Lakes, because they are so swollen, some of those strong winds will create wave heights that will erode the beaches. And we've already seen in southwestern part of Ontario, some breakwaters have collapsed. So it's already started raining in Windsor and London, about mid-afternoon here in Toronto and Montreal by 3 o'clock in the morning. And Friday will be a very wet day over parts of Ontario and Quebec, and also the Maritimes. Bay of Fundy could see 100 millimeters of rain. So it really has been a very wet period that goes back right to the beginning of the year.
All right, many people saying enough already. Dave Phillips, Senior Climatologist for Environment Canada. Thanks so much for your time, Dave.
For residents in Pierrefonds, the hardest part is that this came with no warning.
I was just shocked. Like literally this happened in 4 to 6 hours. I have no idea. I didn't have a care in the world 2 weeks ago.
Winds pushed rising water in the Lake of Two Mountains into the Rivière des Prairies and onto the streets. About 300 homes have been affected on the West Island.
Pretty much when I left, that was pretty much around 3 in the morning. The water was like pretty much up to my knees, and I'm a tall guy, so I'm 6'6", so it was pretty bad.
Some residents came back from work only to see the situation had gotten worse.
There's some things I need to get. I do have my parents' house to go to, but I still have all my things there. Nothing's like home, right?
Emergency officials are trying to get residents to leave their homes.
Going door to door, be sure that people are safe, be sure that everything is fine, and if some people have to be evacuated or they want to evacuate, we'll be there to help them.
The problem is, not everyone wants to leave, even on Ile Mercier, a neighborhood in Ile Bizarre where streets are submerged.
They know that they're at risk, and they want to stay, to remain in their house, because they want to protect their property. They want to install the sump pumps, they want to be there,
Ultimately, they may have no choice as more and more rain will come pouring down starting Friday. Anthony Nerestan, CBC News, Ile Bizarre.
As all this was happening, CBC News learned that blue-collar workers in Pierrefonds were ordered to destroy hundreds of sandbags earlier this week. Sudha Krishnan explains.
I'm here on Rue de Gaulle in Pierrefonds, Roxborough, and just a few houses down are sandbags by the Rivière des Prairies. The sandbags that were meant to prevent flooding, well, look where we are now. And that is why a few blue-collar workers reached out to CBC saying that they were concerned because they say they got an order earlier this week from their chief of the Public Works Department to cut up sandbags housed in the garage, anywhere from 1,600 to 1,800 sandbags. They said that this was unheard of considering they need to keep sandbags in place even well into the summer. And residents here who've been scrambling all day found this quite unusual. We spoke to one woman who came here because Her daughter's home is right on Rue de Gaulle, and she found all this upsetting and confusing.
Not understanding at all why, especially like if people are going to end up with such a great loss and a decision like that was made. I would have thought that maybe, especially, you know, with the water around us, sandbags should be available.
We spoke to the borough mayor about this, and he says all of this was news to him.
It is unacceptable to me, and yes, in fact, we're a riverfront community, and certainly anything could happen at any time. There has to be an amount of sandbags that have to be available at any given moment should we have a crisis or an issue.
Later this afternoon, BASE got confirmation from the city administrator that administrator did make the decision to order that the bags be torn up, thinking they wouldn't need as much anymore. BASE is saying that employee admits it was a poor decision. BASE saying it's not going to happen anymore. He says any decision to be made has to go by him, considering there is more rain on the way in the next couple of days. So the Christian and CBC News, Pierre Fong.
The mayor of Montreal says emergency crews are monitoring the situation around the clock. Denis Coderre says the safety of citizens is the biggest priority right now, and the city is looking at ways to prevent future flooding there.
Do we need some special stations for pumping? Is there new ways to, so at the urban planning level, is there things that we can do? But right now, the emergency is to help the people and making sure that they're not led by themselves.
Tropical cyclone Donna is strengthening. Winds 105 miles per hour with gusts up to 125, and it certainly is affecting Vanuatu. Now, this is going to continue to strengthen throughout the weekend. We're looking at the height of this storm will have max winds at 130 miles per hour by Monday morning before we start to see it gradually weaken. Wind will also be a problem for this, but look at the rainfall that we'll see. On the northern part of the island chain, we could get 12 to 18 inches with this cyclone.
Vanuatu is being pounded by Tropical Cyclone Donna. A trail of destruction follows the Category 3 storm across the Northern Islands. A red alert is active in Torba province, where winds of 200 kilometres an hour and flash flooding have destroyed homes and toppled power lines. The cyclone will strengthen tomorrow as it tracks towards New Caledonia.
We turn this evening to the urgent warning now that 4 countries are on the brink of famine. 20 million people, families and children. Tonight right here, we're with the doctors who are in a race against time as we travel with the American woman who runs Save the Children. You're about to see what we witnessed in Somaliland, an autonomous region in northern Somalia, as millions now face starvation across the Horn of Africa.
We set out to reach some of the most remote villages in Somaliland. There's an urgent crisis unfolding largely unnoticed by the rest of the world. Families and children at risk of starvation. In the first village, Harishef, the line begins early in the morning. They know the trucks are coming.
How many hours away?
That would be like 2 hours, close to 2 hours drive, yes.
To get from the nearest water site?
Yes.
Here, it's not just the food they need, but water. Save the Children is trucking it in.
You haven't had a drenching rain here in years.
Yeah, it hasn't rained in close to 3 years now.
Halima, a mother of 5, stands in line. All of her livestock is gone. They have no food. And we asked the last time there was any rain. She remembers the day. It happened once last year. On the hill sit 2 trucks to deliver water for hundreds of families.
If you look over my shoulder here, you'll actually see that this is what it's like as these families come here every single day to get water.
We witness a rush of families trying to get to the hoses that will give them enough water to last just a couple of days. We journey from west to east. 70% of the livestock, the farm animals, have died.
It's really everywhere you look.
This mother is among the many forced to move closer to a village, hoping for food. She had 200 goats. There are just 10 left, and this is now her home. She shows us where she sleeps with her children.
5 sleep here. You sleep here.
Her days are spent worrying about food.
She worries every day. She's the mother and the father.
Yeah.
As we journey deeper into the desert, we see evidence starvation has set in. They are on the brink of famine now here. April is supposed to be the wettest month, but as you can see, it is bone dry. Authorities say more than 6 million people are now struggling to find food. 200,000 children are at risk of starvation. Our first hospital, and we see the urgent effort to keep the children alive. The little boy being weighed, his eyes filled with fear. And then there was Hamda. She's nearly 2 years old. She's been here 18 days and still weighs just 11 pounds, half of what she's supposed to. The hunger breaking her immune system. She now has pneumonia. The nurse tells us Hamda was so weak, they feared she wouldn't survive another 10 minutes. More than 100 miles away, we arrive at a hospital in Barao, where we're told there aren't enough beds. The moment we walk in, we see it. This little girl is 2 years old, her eyes hollowed. Dr. Yusuf Ali is on the front lines.
These are the lucky ones who reach the hospital, but there are so many kids that do not make to the hospital.
He tells us many children have already died.
You believe you're on the verge of famine?
That's what I believe. That's what I believe.
You're seeing it?
We're seeing it. It's here. I don't need a witness to prove it, because you can see these patients all over here who are malnourished. Most of the kids do not make to the hospital.
Even this boy, who is now here, is still losing weight.
He's in critical condition.
Suffering from severe diarrhea brought on by the hunger.
You can see the bones. There's no flesh on the bones, just skin and bones. That's all we have.
The doctor says there are no promises.
He's still in critical conditions, and we don't know if he's going to make it or not.
There was Samira, almost 2, though her tiny frame says otherwise.
4 days in a row she's lost weight.
Yes.
The hunger breaking down her defenses. She had measles and now pneumonia. And in this hospital where you hear the cries of the babies, equally as haunting is the silence from the toddlers. Osman has lost the strength to talk.
He cannot talk? He hasn't been talking?
The images on the walls here do not distract from the truth. They are running out of time.
You think you're losing those children?
We are losing them. We are losing them.
Aware of that reality, we travel with the American who runs Save the Children, Carolyn Miles, another hour east, where they are now sending out mobile clinics to isolated villages deep in the desert. We find a little boy so weak he cannot stand. They put a band on his arm, the red, signaling severe malnutrition.
You'll bring him to a hospital.
It's one of the worst crises that we've seen since World War II.
Are you concerned the world does not recognize what's happening here?
You know, I don't think the world's really woken up to this disaster at this point. They haven't really realized what's happening.
The possibility of 4 famines at once.
The possibility of 4 famines at once.
As the children are weighed, parents here are given Plumpy-Nut, the packet of nutrients that in the early stages can bring a child back.
Where are you? Where are you?
And in a brief escape, we see the smiles here when we show some of the children their own faces in our phone. A rare moment of joy in a region crushed by hunger. That boy with the band now sent off for emergency care. The next wave of children right behind him.
So many of you have already been tweeting me, writing to us on Facebook, asking how you can help. Save the Children points out that Plumpy-Nut you saw there in the report, that peanut butter and nutrients costs about 50 cents. $10 would feed a child for more than a week. You can learn much more on the World News Tonight Facebook page, and of course, much more of our journey tonight on the brink of famine. That's tonight on Nightline.